My name is Miha Sarani. I am a visual artist. I make music. I was born in Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia. Actually, when I was born, because it was in the last century, it was another country. It used to be called Yugoslavia. And even though my parents were really supportive of me pursuing the idea to draw and play around with that, I think that there was a slight fear on their part of how do you make a living as somebody that makes art, particularly at that time in that part of the world. I mean, there were very few jobs, if there were any jobs, that would really pay somebody to just be creative all day long. It's different than it is today, where you can really kind of apply that to many different practices. And I tried to prove them that I had what it took. So I took this exam when I was 13 or 14 as to see if I could place into art academy, which I would enter at age 14. The exam was, if I remember correctly, the total of it was 9 hours with 1 hour of break in between. And, you know, it didn't happen. I don't think it had really much to do with talent. I think it had to do with politics and connections. I didn't have any of that. I wasn't a child of anybody really important. Our family name didn't carry any kind of, value, social value. I didn't get in. That one failure really defined me for 30 years, or at least 25 years. I abandoned any kind of idea of making art. I mean, I would doodle here and there, but I never thought that it was going to go anywhere. I had a variety of different jobs. I worked at a gas station, I worked at a tourist agency, I worked night shifts at McDonald's, cleaning the restaurant. And then came the skinhead attack, and that really...
Are you comfortable talking about
that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was coming back from my friend's house, and I got jumped by like a dozen skinheads. They really went to work on me, and they broke my skull, my nose, my jaw was dislocated. I lost hearing in one ear. I lost partial vision, collarbone, ribs. I mean, you name it. Nose was broken in 4 different places. The thing I remember they said to me...
Because I know you can't remember much.
Right. One thing I remember that they did say to me before they hit me was that I was born in the wrong country. And I think what that was alluding to was the fact that they were Croatian skinheads. And there was a big soccer match between Slovenia and Croatia that night. And there was several individuals who were too inebriated to be led into the stadium. So the cops would, just like refuse to let them in. Now, you're a skinhead, you traveled from another country for this match, and now they won't let you in the stadium. You're pissed, right? And so you're gonna try to take that anger out. I mean, you're a skinhead. It's not like you're gonna write a poem about it. So they happen to find this fool that's walking on a dark road by himself, and there's an opportunity to release some of that anger. I mean, I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it.
Why did you say fool?
Well, because I should have... you know what, I remember saying to my friend, because I was at a friend's house and we were hooking up his stereo. And I remember saying to him, like, hey, do you mind giving me a ride home? Because it was dark, it was like October. So, this is like 7 o'clock at night, 7:30. So it's pitch dark. And he lives close to the train tracks. So it's not really the safest area to be in. So I said to him, like, hey, do you mind giving me a ride home? He's like, man, I got a hot date. Like, I'm already running late. You live like 10 minutes from here. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I kind of felt like a wuss even asking. So I went out against my better judgment. That's why I said fool. I hear noise behind me as loud people are walking, kicking cans, doing all sorts of stuff. And I'm trying to ignore it. I'm trying to walk, and choices I could have made right there. I could have, gone into one of the buildings. I could have done, who knows, a variety of things, but I didn't. I kept walking. They got up to me. The guy says, you were born in the wrong country. They kicked me down. And the thing I remember is I was conscious the entire time. And so that's how I know how many of them were. And when the whole thing ended, one of the guys kept kicking me, and that I remember him saying too, like, stop, you're gonna kill the guy. They walk away, I get up, it's in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how bad the damage is. So I remember there was like a bar, and so I walk in to try to use the restroom, like splash some cold, I could feel blood running on my face, but like I'm trying to wash my face just a little bit. I gotta go home, right? My first thought is my parents are gonna freak out. I also recall the lady totally like almost fainting when she saw me, the waitress. right behind the bar. And these two guys turn around, they're like, oh my God, what happened, blah, blah, blah. I go in the restroom to clean myself off, and that's the first time I see myself. It's like John Merrick, the Elephant Man. Like things are not in the right place. You know, these are all steel-toed boots, right? Well, I walked home, which instead of taking me 10 minutes, now it took me like close to 45 minutes. But I make my way all the way home, not realizing that I have cracked ribs, they have damaged spine. It's one of those things, you know, when they say like a grandma can lift a car to save the kid. It's like one of those situations.
Crazy adrenaline?
Like you shouldn't really be even moving. But I'm walking home and I get there and I hid behind the door and when my dad came to the door and I sort of warned him, I said, look, I gotta tell you, like I got into an accident. So, you know, and he was like, well, let's see. So I step into the light and he took me to the emergency room. And to add insult to injury, in all my years, only been sort of really in a relationship with one person, like we were actually dating. And I was very devastated when that ended. And she was the admitting nurse when I'm getting checked in. So I'm thinking like this night can't get possibly worse until the doc came in. I remember he pinched my nose, which we had just stopped, and this like Niagara Falls of blood just comes everywhere. Oh yeah, your nose is broken. And I remember my dad getting really triggered and said, an expletive, like, I could have told you his nose is broken. Look at his face. And so they checked me in. I stayed in intensive care for a long time because I was afraid that there was damage to the skull right above the eye, which they were correct. And this really messed me up psychologically for a long time. I would not leave my house as soon as it got dark. I wouldn't go any further than the end of the block. I completely stopped going out. I became really antisocial for the first time in my life. Like I had anxiety meeting people, which I don't have. It took a while to kind of work through it. And in that time, my father told us that we were moving to Naples. I think that I kind of really jumped on board with that because kind of subconsciously it gave me a reason to become a homebody, because now I could be like, well, I don't know this place, I don't know anybody, where am I going to go? But it actually had the opposite effect. And I moved to Naples, and it's almost like subconsciously I had thought that I survived this close encounter with death, and now I was immortal. I would drive a Vespa there. I crashed the bike a few times and hit my head driving it, and still I wouldn't wear a helmet. And that kind of lasted for a while. It was actually when my son was born in 2003 that kind of period of this, like nothing could get me, really, like being aware of my own mortality kind of hit me when he was born. Yeah, lived in Virginia. I was shocked at the amount of kind of totally inappropriate questions that I would get asked as an immigrant. I mean, particularly after 9/11. That was an eye-opening experience for sure. And then we moved back to Sicily. I quit my job and I decided to stay home and raise Eddie 24/7. I mean, I taught that little dude how to walk, how to talk, how to kick a ball, draw, play with Legos, like everything. Then my daughter was born, Anna. Then my ex-wife and I got divorced. She returned to the US and the kids came with her. Came back to San Jose in 2007. Shortly after that, got a job working at Starbucks. I really took that, you know, I figured, okay, this is gonna be my vocation. This is who I'm gonna be. I'm gonna help manage this store. And then Tom, she said, you know, you should really think about maybe finishing the school. Through this entire time, I would be taking classes that would keep adding to my degree. So she said, well, you know, why don't you go to community college? There's one down the street. Finish these 2-3 credits. You know, have that under your belt. You feel you have some accomplishment with that too. I went to Mission College and I apparently had an elective to take. So they said you can take any of these wonderful classes that we have. So the first one that I took was Introduction to Drawing with Cheryl Kuhn. And that class really changed my life. After the final portfolio review, she asked, you know, what are you intending on doing? My degree at that point was business. And she said, you should maybe think about art. And so everything we've been covering right here, it went back to that 13-year-old kid. All he wanted to do was draw. Everything just crystallized. I was like, well, what do I have to do? She said, well, we have a great art program at San Jose State. So why don't you try to apply and transfer there? I took the next class, and at the same time, she said, you are going to have some painting classes because those are going to be requirement on your portfolio. Now, I have never had any desire to paint. I had no interest in. All I wanted to do was draw. I wanted to get really good at drawing because my work was very precise, meticulous. In painting, I couldn't have that control. I told my wife, I don't want to paint. I have no interest in painting. I have no desire to paint. And she said, you should try it and then say you don't like it. I ended up taking George's painting class, in which I met Vanessa, and seeing what she was doing, I saw that things could be precise. Her handling of the brush was extraordinary. And I thought, this is not that different than drawing. With the right tools and the right approach. And so surrounding myself with people like Vanessa and eventually Oscar and Leo and under guidance of Mark Angle and George, I ended up applying to San Jose State and I got in there. I was struggling whether I wanted to do art making as a degree or if I wanted to move to art history. And that was largely due to Preston. Preston and I would have these conversations and I realized that really, and this is my own viewing on things, it's not how it is, but I think there's really essentially comes down to two types of artists. And to kind of put it in a context that is more applicable to a wider audience, you can either be Bob Dylan or you can be the Rolling Stones. Now, they're both fantastic. They both do incredible work. But Bob Dylan is not afraid to experiment. His work doesn't rely on specific sound, producing the same thing over and over again. Bob Dylan can put out an album of Frank Sinatra covers with mariachi band. He's willing to take that risk because who knows where that takes him, what he's going to uncover. The Stones really haven't made a great album since, Sticky Fingers. And what I mean great album, they haven't really experimented, right? Once they got locked in a specific sound, what it takes to make a Stones song, they don't want to jeopardize that, right? So in art, you could be somebody like Jackson Pollock. You could make a ton of money doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And you may be good at it. It has a mass appeal, right? But I don't like repetition. I find it incredibly boring. And I don't think it does anything for my soul. Or you could be like Duchamp, and where people are going to look at you and say, what the heck is this? And right there and then I decided that seriality and repetition in terms of art making was never going to be my thing. And I was also aware that that would mean that it would be really hard for me to try to market my work because it's more difficult when you don't know what's coming your way. But I can't complain, really. I have been very fortunate to have an extremely supportive and loving family around me. My wife is just amazing. I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for Tom. She's the genesis for it all. Not only were her suggestion, which led to this, and not be defined by that failure for the rest of my life. But even because I couldn't do this, I wouldn't have the freedom to do this. And I've also been incredibly fortunate to have come across individuals in my life that informed all these steps, from what may appear like major players in terms of, either my parents, my family, my teachers, my professors, or people that were in classes with me. I learned, as much from them as from anybody else. To smaller events, such as like this incident, this accident, whatever. It may feel like a major thing, but it happened forever ago and it was a blip in a long line of events, but it does inform one's journey. So that's kind of, in a very long, roundabout way, how I got to where I am. And where I am right now is in the basement of our house in Seattle, where I have put down roots and we've established the artistic compound, which is the Slovene Machine Studio. Just connection, if it impacts them, right? Whether by saying, ooh, I felt that. It's interesting when I had the Trojan Soul exhibit, I began experimenting with kind of applying this process and the aesthetic, which I was immensely proud at the time. And of course, it also incorporated music, which was my interest in expanding beyond 3 dimensions. I wanted to manipulate the viewer by having them spend that time with the work. They had to, right? They were listening to the compositions as they were looking at the pieces. But I remember that the people that work most resonated with were people that had some kind of significant life experiences under their belt. People that have gone through divorce, loss, have had those things affect them. And I don't want to say younger group, but people that were still kind of at the more beginning stages of their life, kind of had a hard time connecting with that work. It didn't have the same kind of impact. I think that that's something that I've often experienced when talking to viewers of my work, is that there's some people feel it really deeply and profoundly, and that's extraordinary to me. To think that something that came out of nowhere, it didn't exist before. I made it, right? I just pulled it out of thin air, and there it is. has such an impact on someone else. We're not looking at nature. You know what I mean? It's not something that took centuries to make. It's not the Great Wall of China. It took a million people to build. It's something that I made here in the basement by combining colors, by combining narrative elements, by presenting it in a certain way. And that, I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that. I don't want to paint flowers. Now, I'm not taking away from people who do that, right? Each one of us have our interests, but it doesn't do anything for me. So I don't think the people that do paint flowers should stop. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. It's just, it's not my thing. It doesn't do anything for me. I do the work that I think is communicating what I'm trying to say in the best possible way. If I think abstraction is better suited for that, that's the path that I take. I personally don't really work in seriality and repetition because I find that it's very easy to revert back to the training. And if you were taught as a painter and trained as a painter, then everything you do is painting because you just fit whatever the subject matter is, whatever the things you want to do into that pursuit. But the same way you wouldn't ask a handyman to use a hammer for every single job, why would that methodology can't apply to everything? Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need pliers. Sometimes you need a combination of those things. And so I approach what I do, whether it suits it better with sound or if it suits it better with visual interpretation. It always comes to how is that information going to be the best and most succinctly communicated to the audience. And that to me is always a primary concern. I'm not really concerned if it's going to look good. I know that sounds horrible because probably if I did, I would be more successful. But there has to be a truth to it. And the truth is that, you know, things aren't always pretty. And the work that I pursue, the subject matters I tackle, are often not pretty subject matters. My social media handles, Slovene Machine on Instagram. You should certainly follow that. I am trying to trademark that term, Slovene Machine. So if you guys can use it throughout this video, I'd be really grateful. Because that means that I can then have it trademarked. And you can find me on other places too, Twitter and Facebook. But this Slovene Machine is really important. Although it's a little incorrect these days because I'm also American. I became a citizen, so I guess it should be American Slovene Machine. Or Slovene American Machine. I'm workshopping it, but you kind of get the gist.
Okay, yeah.
Slovene Machine.